Item 8B, hold public hearing, waive first reading, introduce an ordinance amending Chapter 12.96.150, regulating auto-related uses in the M-1 Industrial District of the San Bruno Municipal Code. And Director...
Thank you, and good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. The M1 district is comprised of the area north of 380 between San Mateo Avenue and the train tracks, basically the 10, 11, and 1200 block of San Mateo Avenue and Montgomery Avenue. When this district was first formed over 50 years ago, it was primarily comprised of manufacturing uses. However, as those manufacturing uses have moved elsewhere, a lot of those spaces have been taken up now by auto-related spaces. Just to give you some statistics, out of about the 90 plus, 95 commercial uses within that area, the non-residential uses, about 55% of them now are auto uses. So this has tilted towards the auto side within the last decade or two. Regarding a background, this was originally brought up as a subject at a redevelopment agency meeting when it was requested that staff go back and look at what are some minor improvements that we could look for the area, some short-term improvements as well as some long-term improvements. We then brought that back to a study session to the City Council, and the City Council gave direction for one of the long-term solutions was to move the auto-related uses within this area from a permitted use to a conditional use. And what a conditional use means is that you would have to go to the Planning Commission and that use would have to be fully reviewed. So what that actually means for businesses in that area, we will first look at what it would mean to the non-auto related buildings there. So if a new auto use were to move in that building, they would have to go to the Planning Commission for review, and it would be publicly reviewed. That wouldn't actually change much from what is current practice because a lot of those existing manufacturing uses don't have enough parking, so they would have to go to the Planning Commission anyway for a parking exception. It would be now they would have to apply for a use permit as well as a parking exception. However, this would also apply to auto-related businesses that are changing the type of use. So if you were going from an oil change place, a smog checking place, to an auto body repair business, then you would also have to go through the use permit process. So would there be additional discretion, additional conditions that we could place on the businesses as a city, additional public review, so that neighbors, people who know that area the best, can tell staff what would work for that type of business so it could best fit into the neighborhood. Regarding public input, we sent out a notice prior to the Planning Commission meeting explaining what this ordinance would entail. Since the Planning Commission meeting, I've talked to about 10 different business owners or property owners within the area, and the consensus is that this is a good first step, that this is a way to allow additional public review, a way to allow the public to get involved. There were from a couple existing property owners, there were some concerns. Two property owners that own manufacturing uses were concerned that they would not be able to put in an auto use ever. And we explained both at the Planning Commission meeting as well as when I talked to him on the telephone that this is not prohibiting new auto uses. This is just setting up an additional step. As I stated before, most of those existing manufacturing uses would have to go to the Planning Commission anyway because of the parking exceptions. There have been, actually, I'd also like to note, one property owner made a insightful comment. He stated that at the Planning Commission meeting that a majority of the problems caused in that area we've noticed the same thing, is that 90% of the businesses function well. It's 10% of those businesses that are causing 90% of the problems. And he made the recommendation at the meeting that we look into some time parking in that area, because what he has noticed is that many of the businesses will park cars that they're working on for 72 hours at a time, perhaps move them for street cleaning, but just move them to the other side of the street. And unfortunately, those 10% of the businesses are taking away customer parking, taking away employee parking for the rest of the businesses within that area. Some other enforcement actions that we're doing in the area, in addition to proposing this minor code amendment. The first is that the fire department has done about 100 inspections annually over the last year, actually 102 last year, and this has really given them a chance to go in and check safety concerns in these and have people correct immediate safety concerns and get to know some of the business owners in the area. There's also been a number of code enforcement actions that we've had to help clean up the businesses. And finally, what we've been doing for about the last year is all new businesses moving into the area, we have them sign industrial performance standards. And what those industrial performance standards do is outline exactly what the rules are, what are some of the problems we've had in the area before, and we also establish a contact at that point with the business owner. So if we have future problems, we'll know who to contact. Before I close, one thing I'd like to know, one thing I didn't cover is if you have an existing oil change business down there and you sell the business to another person that's also doing an oil change business, you would not have to go through that use permit process because you're grandfathered in. So with that, we are recommending approval of this. The Planning Commission also recommended approval, and I can take any questions.
Questions of staff?
Through the chair.
Councilman Ibarra?
Aaron, you just gave an example of an oil change business, so is that true with an auto repair business? A clear auto repair business?
Correct. There's a definition within our code related to commercial uses of minor repair and major repair, and they basically define them. I have the exact code here, but it basically defines auto repair, brake changes, transmission repair. That's considered minor repair. Major repair is generally auto body repair uses. So if you went from a transmission shop to an auto body shop, then that would require the use permit process.
If you have an existing major repair auto repair, fixing engines, whatever, and you decide to go out of business and you sell, your lease is up or you move, and the owner of the building is able to lease it to another auto repair of the same
type,
same intensity.
You go. There's no planning commission process because you're grandfathered in. However, we would still follow up with the industrial performance standards, making the business owner aware of what issues there are. Overall, we've estimated that this would end up having about somewhere between 3 and 5 businesses a year that would have to go through the use permit process as they turn over into different types of uses.
Is there any way that we can put that condition on any change in business? I mean, get rid of this grandfather?
No, that's really set by state law, having to do with just land use and land use interpretation. And our own code specifies that with a use or a type of use that's it becomes not allowed after a period of time, the way that it occurs that you would then come under the new rules depends on whether there's been a break in time that is sufficient. I think in the code it might be 6 months, or a substantial change in use, things like that. But this is really well set in state law, so I find that the city could not alter that.
The reason why, I like the idea that auto repair, and I've been a part of the whole review process on auto repair, and the city has really cracked down on addressing the impacts of auto repair businesses because of the amount of vehicles that they entail. But you say the 10% of the violators are businesses, in some cases, that have no parking. And they are grandfathered in, and they can go on to perpetuity with auto repair on, and the only way that they can maintain a business is putting those cars on the street somewhere. And that's and maybe time parking will alleviate that, but until we can, if you really, in my opinion, if you really want to get auto repair in compliance with parking and the impacts that they have, I think you have to condition it in that whole district, no matter what. Is there a way that you can reduce that 6 months to, say, 3 months?
Yeah, I'll be happy to research that for you, but my understanding is that there's some substantial amount of time that needs to go by. But I'll be happy to look at the cases and see if there's been any change in generally how that's been interpreted.
Councilman.
Through the chair, I appreciate what Councilman Ibarra is saying, but then the concern is that those that have already been permitted by the city itself, by the process, by the department, basically we're going to go back and say, well, we've changed the rules. And I don't know if that's what I'm hearing you say. Is that what, because yes, you are correct that some of the businesses don't have adequate parking, but then they were allowed to gain their permit by the process that was, it should have never gone, if it shouldn't have been, it shouldn't have been. But it is what it is. So I think going forward, it's a good step to try to correct what we have, but I think to go back and now reverse what the rules were are kind of challenging to a business, unless I'm understanding it incorrectly.
Well, my concern is that I was involved in working with an auto repair business, and they purchased a building that could not be grandfathered. It had manufacturing, like you stated, and it had smog repair or something, and they wanted to incorporate an auto repair, a full auto repair business. So it was a change in use, and that's what we're tackling. But on next door and 2 doors down and a few doors down, in other words, I mean, total, non-compliant auto repair businesses. So in this case, you've got a business that was not auto repair, and so you got full compliance, compliance with the ordinance, parking and everything, and it's as far as the zoning code is concerned, the municipal code is concerned, it's a legitimate auto repair compliant facility. Those other businesses that are auto repair, they keep turning over and over with, auto repair businesses. They'll never have, they'll never be reviewed.
It is a slow process. I mean, use permits run with the land, and that's a basic tenet of land use law. So they run with the land, and it doesn't really matter who the owner is. The owners can change over time. So the only thing that really changes that is if there is a significant change in use, or there is a stopping of the use for a substantial period of time. So it does present a difficulty for cities in changing a particular policy, because it can only occur slowly over time.
Oh, well.
But at the same time, it does afford the business some protection as well. I mean, if you've come in and operated a business for 20 years and maybe you want your son to step into the business, that there's some assurance that you're going to be able to continue to operate your business there as long as you meet the codes and laws under which you open the business. So, any other questions from council?
The only final thing I was going to say, I'm sorry, Ray, was the director mentioned about one of the folks had called in regards to a time limitation, whether it's 12 hours, 24 hours, but something that would require that parking does not, there's not a lot of parking down there as it is. We all know that. I've been given a tour by a few people. So I realize the congestion. And maybe that is something staff might want to look at with council direction, that maybe we do regulate that in some sense so that we ensure that we do have these vehicles moving and they're not sitting there for 72 hours or longer.
Any other questions?
I would like to do a comment, thank you. First of all, I'd like to applaud the efforts that you've made. I know it's a tedious job, and the long-term effects will get there. We'll get there eventually, but it's going to take a while, and it's just the way it is. So I applaud the first steps that you've made and the long-term goals that you have there. So I think it's very exciting. And with that, I waive the first reading.
Oh, no, this is a public hearing. We have to open the public
Oh, you're right. Open the public
Okay.
hearing.
This is a public hearing. Any members of the public wanting to address the city council on this ordinance, please come forward.
See, I didn't think there would-
Seeing no one, if we close the public hearing, you will be precluded from speaking on this ordinance. If not,
Sure.
action to close the public hearing.
Move to close public hearing?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Council discussion or action?
Okay, now I'll waive the first reading.
Okay. The first reading has been waived. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion on the floor. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And I'd like to introduce the ordinance.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Councilmember O'Connell.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Councilmember Ibera.
Aye.
Mayor Franzella.
Aye. Thank you.
Through the chair, Mr. Mayor?
Councilman Rivera?
If we could direct staff to definitely, I guess the process would be to go to the Traffic and Safety Parking Committee and definitely look into time limits, things or at least a study in that area.
Okay.